an incredible series. And I know that many of you are here participating, and that many of you are also connecting with us after the fact. So, I know that October, I feel like this month has just been a kind of mad dash almost, of trying to get everything done that we didn't get done in the last 18 months. So a warm welcome to you all just landing here together in this space. We've really, gone through a number of topics in our dialogue series, and just understanding what does feminine leadership actually mean to us, because with Isabel's experience, it's as she's shared, and with my experience that I've shared over the weeks and months, we've realized that feminine leadership has been there's been so many important leaps that have happened over time, both with women as leaders and also cultivating this internal experience of feminine leadership, and kind of bringing some of the softer pieces or dialogue or heart into our leadership journeys. And we've also struggled with what's the real word for that now, as we look at gender on a spectrum, and start to think about an evolution of what leadership style is needed in this very, very quickly changing world, and, a lot of disruption that we're seeing across the planet. So as we do that, we look to leaders to guide us. We look to others who have been really, present in leading and guiding the journey of others. And as Isabel said, we now turn to look at what is the generations that are coming up now, how do they look at feminine leadership, and how do we look at it together and cultivate this kind of leadership, so we don't go backwards, and we continue to use this type of leadership to address the current context of our times. So with that, we have Maya Penn, who is joining us. And Maya is an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, an animator, an artist. She's a CEO of an eco-friendly fashion company, Maya's Ideas, which she started at 8 years old, and has evolved over the years. And she, I have just found so much personal inspiration from you, Maya. So thank you for joining us and being with us today, for all of the work that you've done and continue to do to inspire others around the world with your multiple TED Talks, and the films that you've produced and continue to put out. So thank you for your incredible presence here with us, but also the work that you do that you've done over the years, and that you will continue to do.
Yes, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Antoinette. I really appreciate it. It is such an honor to be a speaker for this incredible series that talks to an issue that's really important, that's really near and dear to my heart. And just to kind of add on to that already awesome introduction, I am Maya Penn. I'm a 21-year-old CEO, environmental activist, humanitarian, women and girls' rights activist. I am an animator and a filmmaker, so I do have my own animation production company. We're actually specifically focused on working with and hiring women, gender non-conforming artists and animators, within the industry. And so that's something that I'm working on some really cool projects, specifically around social and environmentally good focused media and stories. We've worked with Hulu, Luna for their Equal Pay Day campaign, as well as a lot of Women's History Month projects. So I'm leading a team project now that I'm really excited about. I also have my own nonprofit organization called Maya's Ideas for the Planet that I founded in 2011, which is focused on environmental justice and humanitarian issues. And one ongoing project has been creating eco-friendly sanitary pads and shipping them to communities in need, both here in the US and also in Haiti, Senegal, Somalia, and Cameroon. And of course, this disproportionately affects young women and girls, and also can affect their access to education and a number of other topics. And so period poverty is also one. Also, through my own work within the sustainable fashion space, I speak a lot to the importance of spotlighting, people of color, women of color in the conversation, because um, they are, from an ethical standpoint, the most adversely affected when it comes to the fashion industry. And so having those kind of voices at the forefront is really important. So that's kind of in a nutshell for what I do. But I started all of this in 2008 when I was 8 years old. I've been doing all of this for 13 years now. And I've been a speaker for the UN Environment Program, given 3 TED Talks, as you mentioned. I've also received a commendation from President Barack Obama for outstanding achievement in environmental stewardship. And in 2016, when I was 16 years old, I was actually commissioned to animate the opening of the first ever digital report presented to Congress. And this was to get an American Museum of Women's History built in Washington. So I created and animated everything from start to finish. I went to the Capitol at 16 and presented it. It is actually presented to President Obama the next day, which I didn't know for a while. And actually, as of 2021, that legislation has now been passed through the Senate. So there can be, a museum showcasing the achievements and contributions of women across US history. So I have my hands in a lot of different areas, but there's always that common thread of, sustainable and social justice, and, really lifting up the marginalized and underrepresented voices within various industries. So, yeah.
My huge round of applause and standing ovation. And, from my part, and, I think many of us, we just want to find ways to continue to support you to do the good work that you're doing, because it's absolutely outstanding. And so, I know that as we continue to evolve our partnership with working with Eileen Fisher and others, we want to find ways to continue to lift up the work that you're doing. So thank you for being here and for sharing these, this incredible spot that you're in. And I'm curious, over the years I've worked with a lot of young women, and one of the things that we often face is this experience of, well, I don't know how I can make a contribution. I don't know how I can make a difference. And we get into this kind of paralysis, and it feels like you have not, you have not gotten down that, beaten down by that kind of, I feel stuck, or, that kind of, so I'm curious, what has propelled you to move through the, each phase of your journey in creating all of these different elements, and what have you learned?
I think that I've always really kind of been someone who has, been very driven, because I've always understood from a young age the impact that we all have as individuals on both our community and ultimately the planet. And, a lot of that has been cultivated through giving back through social good. Like, some of my earliest memories are of me and my parents donating canned goods and clothing to food banks and homeless shelters here in Atlanta. And, just kind of knowing that that impact that you have. And of course, people think, oh, that's just kind of in that the kind of giving back sector, but that teaches you a lot also too, as an entrepreneur as well, because and I'm someone who's always really focused on being a social entrepreneur and having some sort of element of change and industry change within every endeavor that I take on. And I personally have been focusing on my mission being around making the change rather than trying to fit in and see, how can I just make it up that the ranks, or the ladder, so to speak. Like, I've never wanted to go in that traditional path. I've wanted to build my own table, so to speak, for other people who also just want to reshape a lot of the industries that need so much help from a both social and sustainable standpoint. And the lack of diversity that comes from a gender aspect, from a racial aspect, from even talking about disability, and just a whole layer of areas that are often really overlooked. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to build my own table. I'm also going to use my own authentic voice and, experience that I, cultivated over the, 13 years to make a difference and at least get people more aware and inspired to make some sort of a change even within their own organizations as well. So I think that, that's something that drive for me has, just really come from almost kind of an activism, standpoint. And, I speak a lot and a lot of people have, asked me to speak to the power of activism, even within entrepreneurial spaces and how, you kind of can't separate those two areas because everyone's looking to see how they can incorporate corporate social responsibility now. Like companies of all sizes are looking and they're seeing that people really care about this and want to work with organizations that align with their values, as people. So
Absolutely.
yeah, as I think I've always kind of helped to push that forward, at least from a Gen Z perspective.
Absolutely. I think that, this kind of purpose-driven economy right now and what we're seeing in across businesses, nonprofits, I mean, all different layers, we're seeing that people want to be driven by purpose and meaning, and not just what the task is or how much money we can make or et cetera, et cetera. So I think you are definitely not alone in that and speaking to something that really is um, it's a phenomenon happening around the world. So I'm curious, kind of maybe fitting within that, what your leadership style is. You've been, we've been talking about feminine leadership. We've been talking about a lot of different types of leadership. What's the Maya Penn version of leadership, especially as you build your own table? What characteristics or qualities are you bringing to that?
I think that, I'm someone who's always been very, creator driven in my leadership. And I've always been someone who is always mission focused in my leadership as well. So that can be seen throughout every aspect and level of all of my, endeavors. And so whether you're, talking about my sustainable fashion company, I'm looking to see how can I really, collaborate and support the artisans that I might work with, in order to, really kind of, I'm really someone who likes to build, a support system beyond just, oh, we're working, on this thing, we're working to create a product. It's like, how can we really kind of build a support system in a community in a way that can really benefit the people that I work with, beyond just working with my company or my nonprofit. So that's something that has always been really important to me, is to help, especially like other young people who are trying to break into certain industries and that come from like marginalized communities. It's like, if I can help you meet that, mentor who's been instrumental for me, over the years, or if I can, help spotlight the small business that you've started on my Instagram or like whatever it is, it's like that has always been that kind of reaching back, because I always speak about success. For me, the true definition of success is not only reaching your own goals, but also reaching back and helping others achieve their goals as well. That's something that is so, so important. And just using whatever kind of resources or insight or opportunities that you have to, help lift other people up is so powerful. And I also, through my nonprofit, I'm doing a lot of work in, now I'm starting a program to give seed grants to other young women who want to start their own social entrepreneurial endeavors. And, like all of it has been intertwined with that. Nothing is, it's just a business, it's just a nonprofit, it's just an organization. Like everything is a movement in some way or part of a movement. And, really that holistic impact is important to me.
Absolutely. I think that collaboration space, that you talk about, for example, even just, what's present here is this reaching across a lot of perceived organizational boundaries. There's often this kind of siloed way of operating, that this is my organization and this is how I, how I'm making it happen, and, whatever we've named it, whatever we've called it, but actually reaching across those perceived boundaries and seeing ourselves as working for something that we have in common. So I really appreciate that, and the way that you shared it too, that we're reaching back, lifting each other up, that we're, and cross posting across channels. There's a lot of ways to think about it these days, but the more that we can collaborate and really work together in these areas, I think that is an incredible part of our leadership journey. And then maybe just narrowing down a little bit into this topic of feminine leadership, how do you define it or think about it? Do you think about feminine leadership? Does it come up for you? Or what do you think about feminine leadership, and how might you define it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the way our, society is extremely, built on misogyny, there's kind of, it's kind of evident to see that definitely 100% leaks into the business world as well. And, the thing is that this kind of, way that the business world operates, it hinders everybody. Obviously, it hinders women in a huge way. And especially with what happened with the pandemic, too. Something that frightens me a lot is how many, women have left the workforce. And that's something that I'm also working to combat through my nonprofit as well. But I mean, the thing is that there is just not enough support and understanding around what, women and, and people who are in the space who need that just kind of extra understanding of, here's how to make this a more inclusive space. I think what's really important is to know we need to completely redefine what it means to be a leader, what it means to be a strong leader within a space, or, and these different ideas of, I don't know if professionalism is the word, but it can be the smallest thing from, women feeling like they might not be able to express themselves in a way that's more feminine because, oh, they'll just be treated as, being too soft, or, like, or whatever that is. Or even another, what I was talking about with, some of my friends, about some people feel like they can't even put, that many exclamation points in the email because their male counterparts aren't doing that, and they, that can come off as like too soft or too feminine. But the thing is that I think what we need, because here's the catch, because the business world is shifting to corporate social responsibility, is looking at, environmental social governance and diversity and inclusion and all these different layers that actually require a more thoughtful approach. It's like, oh, we don't know how to like do that. Like, people that are at the heads of these companies are like, wait, how do we do that? Because we haven't been thoughtful, or and caring, and conscious in that same kind of way, until now it's presented to us that we have to make the shift in order to meet the newest standard of what's, expected from consumers, and even from, other stakeholders and shareholders and investors, people that are looking to green their portfolio or make their portfolio more social good oriented, or like anything. And so all of that, I'm saying all of that to say, I think that there is as I kind of mentioned before, the level of this, it impacts everyone negatively because, anyone of any gender feels like they always have to assert themselves in a way that's, aggressive, or in a way that, it's just not really necessary for every project either, and can be honestly really exhausting. And everyone kind of has feminine and masculine energy to them, no matter who you are. And so I think that, when you're not really able to tap into that, to tap into that more caring, thoughtful, nurturing kind of side as a business leader, then you can feel really drained and stifled, no matter who you are. And then obviously there's so many other layers with the wage gap, which is really terrifying. There's other layers when it comes to looking at how Black, Brown, and Indigenous women are, really adversely impacted. I mean, there's so much that you could kind of drill into about what feminine leadership means, but I think for me, just in a nutshell, it means really taking a more conscious, thoughtful, and nurturing approach to your work and to business, and also a more inclusive approach, because we're looking to see how we can really bring up, uplift, and nurture everyone. And that's not to say that, the opposite isn't true for, like kind of more masculine styles of leadership, but I think you just need to have that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this conversation about looking at where even work comes from, like what is, what's been kind of rooted in a misogynistic or patriarchal way of operating in the world, or, um, yeah, and what the expectation has been on men as well, just looking at how toxic masculinity comes into the workplace, or even, I was
Yeah.
a friend did some research and realized that offices are kept at a particular temperature that was set by men, and that women have a different biological need for a different temperature, and that might change. So it's just fascinating to think about, how do we work best as women? That's one question. And then I love what you also shared, that of course there's masculine and feminine energies that live in all of us, and that where you landed around consciousness and caring and nurturing, and how that can and needs to shine through in the workplace, and in a leadership journey, because of everything that you shared. And not just because of the standards, but also because at the end of the day, what we see in, the Eileen Fisher world is that the bottom line is also affected. It's not just that it's a CSR kind of over here thing, or and, speaking to a lot of nonprofit leaders, it's not just a nonprofit kind of, this is a caring space and that's why women end up there or something, that it's really about nurturing these different qualities. And that's not always easy. We talk about it as something that is, it's going to be like, okay, I'm going to go into the work world and I'm just going to bring this in. But it's definitely not always easy. And especially when an organization is set with a particular hierarchy. And Isabel has talked often about that. But I'm curious, before we turn it to Isabel, what has been your biggest challenge? Just noting that that's not easy, but what's been your biggest challenge with bringing in this leadership style, and kind of way of operating and building the table that you've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone who has been an anomaly in every single room that I've stepped into for multiple different reasons. Obviously, being a woman, being a young woman, also being a young Black woman. And also, on another level, being someone who's always spoken about sustainability, has always spoken about social good, and all of those different layers that weren't really as closely looked at as they are now. Like, all of those different variables made me really stand out. And, in some ways, they, I have been someone who, someone, might see me and they're like, well, why do you care about trying to, implement social good in business and sustainability? I mean, like, what is the need for this? And of course, there are also, a number of prejudices that I've also faced as well. And, whether that be, in a pitch meeting or in an email correspondence, like, sometimes you just, or it's very clear to you. But I think that too, I'm also someone who has worked and works as a consultant as well around CSR and a number of different topics. And I've really seen how all of those different layers that made me stand out, and that, made people not want to take a risk on me, so to speak, because, they don't fund women, or, or they don't really collaborate with that many people of color in a certain industry, and they just don't know, all of those different elements have now been really to my advantage, even before we've had more of these kind of discussions and movements on a larger scale, because they've always made my voice stand out. People remember me, people know that I'm coming from a more unique and overlooked perspective in many industries. And that's something that I can always attest to, that I've always, I've never been apologetic, or I've never really, flinched away from all of those different areas of who I am, because they do shape how I move through the world as an entrepreneur, as an activist. And I really have seen how many businesses I've consulted. Fortune 500 companies, I've consulted small startups and everything in between. And everyone is really understanding, okay, this isn't a fad, this isn't a trend, this isn't a phase. Like this is the new standard of business and what's really expected. And you mentioned the bottom line. Now there's a triple bottom line, that people and planet are factored into that too. That's so all deeply intertwined. And when people see me and other entrepreneurs and activists like me, and they see them coming from a really authentic place and have all this hands-on knowledge, just because I've been myself despite any kind of adversities or prejudice that I face, that really kind of makes my work more effective and impactful, and my collaborations more effective and impactful as well. So, like I said, even though I face those challenges, it's really, I think, in some ways it's been to my benefit ultimately, because now I'm at a place where I can make sure other people don't have to go through those same challenges, or can go through at least less of those challenges and prejudices, and help bring them up too.
Wonderful. I mean, how amazing to be able to see a challenge and then move through the challenge and then integrate that as a strength. And I think that's, just at any leadership journey, that's the key, to be able to look at a challenge, to move through it, to be able to be aware of it, and what you're, integrating in your own leadership capacity. So to be able to use that is phenomenal.
Great. Okay, so I think just to underline this last part of the conversation, it's so important not to show up as a victim, but rather to show up as being so lucky, and really feeling that we're so lucky to be a woman and with all that it brings. And I think that's why you're being so effective as a leader, is that that centeredness around that. So I have a question which is sort of related, which is about beauty. So in the world that I grew up in, I remember when I was, around your age, I was told, if you dress like that, you will never get anywhere in this place, because it was all men with dark suits. And so for a woman to be colorful, or to be, showing their beauty was disruptive. And then I see so many women now, younger like you, who are very comfortable with that beauty and that sensuality, and that and showing up really with all the power that brings as well. So I wanted to ask you, how do you think about how you show up with the beauty? Is beauty part of what you feel is your own power? How do you own that?
I really love that question, because, I am someone who really likes to express myself through my clothing, through my makeup, through my earrings, through, things that are, considered like really feminine and, kind of non-traditional in the business space. And I think that's that can be an hour-long conversation within itself. I think it's really important, for people, especially women, to be able to show up and express themselves physically in the way that makes them feel most powerful, not in the context of what other people think about them, but what they think about themselves. Like, this is how I feel inside. I want to wear this, this yellow dress today, or I want to put on this eyeshadow or these pretty earrings or whatever. Like, I feel like people should be able to show up in the way that makes them feel the most comfortable. And that really goes back to challenging, what does this idea of professionalism looks like. If professionalism just looks like dark suits to you, then maybe you have a really outdated view of what that means, Like, I think that it's important to, it's important for people to be able to tap into what makes them feel most powerful and what makes them most effective in work, and someone might think that, oh well, if someone feels like they have to dress a certain way in order to be more effective at work, that doesn't make any sense. But it's just that extra step, that extra kind of boost you get when you're able to really represent yourself in a way that feels authentic to you. And that's that I really love that question, because I think that there needs to be a complete shift of, again, what's expected in the business world and of gender norms. And, if I'm someone who, wants to, wear more brighter colors, as you can see, I love bright colors, or have a certain, color eyeshadow or nail polish or whatever that might be, that doesn't in any way, shape, or form undermine my effectiveness as a leader, in any space. And yeah, I think that's something that's really crucial to speak to. And there's also, I'm going to touch very quickly on another layer of that, as well, even when it comes to, me having, wear my natural hair. That's been a huge conversation too, about professionalism in that way. And I'm also someone who's a big advocate for the Crown Act, which is, kind of around making sure that, especially, people like people of kind of African descent can wear their hair in a way that's most, comfortable and natural for them, and, not be discriminated for it. So all around, there needs to be a huge shift in what it means to show up, and look like a leader in the business world. So thank you for that question.
Yeah. And it's also a very creative part, but also I think what you just pointed out, when I was starting to work in the World Bank, there were women of many different cultures, men too, but especially women of many different cultures from all parts of Africa, from South Asia, from Indonesia, and everybody was conforming to this, what was supposed to be this norm. And over the years, over 30 years, it totally changed. And the way that women from Africa would show up with beautiful clothes and headgear, and the Indian women with their amazing textiles and cloth. I mean, it was a completely different expression of both creativity, but also identity. So it goes beyond just being a woman. It's also about different cultures that come in and need to find a place in the workspace. And that's where I think the feminine is going to be naturally more inclusive of holding all that diversity in the way that we show up in the workplace. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I totally agree with that.
I love this conversation. Also because, a big part of my work with Eileen Fisher has been about how we express ourselves and being comfortable in our bodies. And, Eileen's story is really about how she felt like she was an uncomfortable person and she wanted to feel comfortable in her body as a woman. And she changed the game on and how women show up in the workplace with the clothing that she created. So that's very, very near and dear to my heart as a question, and the inspiration for so much of what I've done with young women's leadership is really, how do we feel comfortable and confident in who we are? And Maya, you are such an outstanding example of that, and inspiration for me, and I'm sure many others. I see a question coming in, and I often think of a piece of feminine leadership as a different awareness and appreciation of relationships. In this pandemic, when so many of us have been remote for many months, I think we're more focused on tasks than ever, and our professional relationships that are not being cultivated and fed. Thoughts, ideas, suggestions on how to move ahead. Do you want to take a stab at thinking about that question a bit and sharing some of your thoughts?
I really love that perspective, and I definitely agree with that. I think that, traditionally it's like, we see our, like going back to relationships, we see our coworkers like, oh, you're like, there's this traditional thing of trying to figure out how you can use people or use people to get ahead instead of like genuinely connecting with people, you know? And I think that that's a huge part for me. Like that's always been big for me. And that goes back to what I was saying originally. Like I want to understand who you are, how I can help, what we have in common, and, you know, really make a real connection that can go beyond just, you know, oh, you know, here we're working on this project or you work for me or whatever it is. Like there needs to be a genuine collaboration that's cultivated, you know, between everyone within the team. And I think that that helps overall make the team stronger. I think in terms of just ways that we can cultivate that now, I think that more companies, you know, since we are remote, we just need to have more days or meetings that can just be dedicated to just connecting and hanging out and just talking about how the week has been going and, you know, what are you working on right now? And, you know, does anybody have any advice on this thing? And, you know, and beyond just, you know, maybe a quick email about a project or an initiative that, or a campaign that everybody, you know, is working on, but just really, you know, being able to have more casual moments of genuine connection, because again, that strengthens how we all work together as a team as well, you know, and you're keeping that in mind makes us stronger overall. So.
Absolutely agree. I think, you know, one of the things Eileen shares often is that the power of our work is really underpinned by the power of our relationships. So um, I totally agree with that. One of the practices that we use is a check-in at the beginning of every meeting. And so, you know, we think about what are the architectures for connection? What are the ways that we can build that in? And I love what you shared about just having a meeting where we can casually connect and just chat. Somebody called it a water cooler conversation, you know, just setting up a Zoom room for that. So absolutely. I think there's, yeah, it's easy to kind of forget that, especially when we're going Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting. But if we bring in tiny practices to connect, that can be a way to share that and continue to foster that kind of relationship building. Isabel, I saw you come off mute. Did you have something to add or?
Yes, somebody
Yeah.
from actually the Bold Solutions Network team, Juan, was telling me the other day of a practice that they have because of this issue that we're so focused on task and not enough on relationships, which is once a week when the whole team gets together, they do something called the spotlight, where one person spends 5 minutes at the beginning of the meeting just talking about their story. And then the meeting continues. And so after a while, you have had everybody talk about the story and sort of get to know each other a little bit better through that.
Now, the theme that we discussed in the breakout was, you know, just how, I guess, important empathy is and emotions, and bringing, like I kind of spoke to earlier, the more human side into business. And, you know, like as I mentioned in the breakout room, you know, we can pretend like we're machines and kind of go, like just, you know, very focused on tasks. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're still human beings. And instead of letting, you know, instead of, you know, the emotion only coming out when everything gets tough or messy or scary, or you're at a, you know, a challenging point as a group or as an individual, it's really important to let there be that open door for people to be able to speak about their emotions and to be able to, you know, not feel weird about just checking in on others and saying like, you know, hey, how are you doing? Like not just as an employee or as a coworker, but as a person. Because that, you know, ultimately will make everyone more, you know, resilient as a team too. And, you know, you feel like you don't have that weight on you. You know, everyone's going through something. So it's important to have that empathy, that patience, that kindness, that compassion. And I think, you know, the pandemic has really shown us that in a lot of ways, you know, but I think that is also a key that's within feminine leadership and, you know, how that can make teams stronger. So that's something that has definitely come up for me that I've always really been passionate about too.
And I think just to build on that and to close, maybe just bring in all of the learnings from the past sessions and the coaching circles as well, Antoinette. It's just like, what do we need to create, to show up fully, right? And for some of us, that has been this type of spaces. So how can we continue to find and to create these conversations in these spaces? I feel like everyone who has reached out as a result of the series, it's been said like, I value to have a space where I can stop and reflect. And so just us to continue to reflect and to think, what do we need to be able to own our feminine leadership and to show up fully, whatever that means for each of us.
I'm very curious to see the ripple effects of this. We will never know, but I have a feeling that they will be there. And so closing on this, I don't know, Veron, if you want to close, but this is the beginning of a journey, I hope, in terms of those ripple effects for each of us.
Yeah, I think, and hopping off of that, just please feel free to share with us any ways these webinars have helped you change your organizational strategy, and any benefits from that. We always are happy to hear of great outcomes.